As I studied physics, the question, what is time, was constantly on my mind. In college, roughly 4 years later, specifically on March 23rd, 1983, it suddenly clicked. I solved the central problem. On that day, I solved the mystery of time. This is what I visualized on that day. In my opinion, every person of science really must understand this. Here's an animation of that idea. Here we have two spheres that are expanding from the same origin. The outer sphere is expanding at the speed of light. The inner sphere is expanding at some slower speed. Let's see that again. There's a difference between the two spheres. I've made it the color red in this animation. This difference represents something critical to understanding time. Let's see that one more time. This mental image was the breakthrough that allowed me to solve the mystery of time. It enabled me to avoid the circular logic that Einstein used in relativity. I'll explain this later. The explanation is really very simple. From the moment I understood time, it gave me a great advantage. Because I understand time, I have an advantage over every other physicist that does not understand time. I might not be good in some areas of physics or in some areas of math, like superstrings, but that really doesn't matter. Understanding time is far more important. It is critical. Talk about having an advantage. Think of a road with a fork in it. On the left is a path of reasoning that leads to complex mathematics. On the right is a path of reasoning that follows simple mathematics. My intuition led me down the path on the right. The great physicists of our time have been influenced by others to believe they must travel down the other path. At present, these physicists are stuck in that path of the physics labyrinth. The path to the Grand Unification of Physics is simplicity, not complexity. People that love physics tend to be a little odd. I am no exception, just as my family, friends, or just about anyone that I've known over my lifetime. A big issue that I have is it is really easy for me just to think about physics. I find it a lot harder to communicate to others what is on my mind. In a moment, a complex physics idea will flash into my mind. Then, it can take me years to turn around and explain it to others. Over the last 18 months, I've been trying to improve on this shortcoming. This film is an obvious example. This has taken me some time. In some respects, I've been working on this film for over 35 years. With that abbreviated background, let me skip ahead and demonstrate a critical experiment for you. Scientists always want experimental proof. There's nothing like a great definitive experiment. When I first visualized this experiment, I immediately realized how important it was to physics, to astronomy, and to creating commercially viable fusion power plants. After I visualized the experiment, I tried it immediately. It was extremely exciting to see it work on the very first attempt. This experiment is fundamental to all of physics. Before I perform this experiment for you, let me point out some important details about fusion energy. In my hand is a vial of fusion fuel. This fusion fuel is simply a form of heavy water. Obviously, this is extremely safe. I cannot be safely holding a vial of fission fuel like uranium or plutonium. I am talking about fusion for a moment because this experiment demonstrates the critical detail that makes fusion energy viable now. Now, with regard to these fusion power plant designs, we have a dilemma. In a nutshell, it is feasible to have operational fusion power plants in only 3 years. In 3 years, energy companies could start building the first commercial fusion power plants. Our dilemma is this: unless we make changes in politics, political changes, it appears likely that our government is not going to let us use them for another 25 years. That is, 25 years after they are working. Understand, these fusion power plants are simple. Compared to many other types of power plants, the designs do not really involve that much complexity. Because these fusion power plants have relatively simple designs, it will not take us long to build and test them. We can build and test them quickly. These fusion power plants will be inexpensive to build because the designs are simple, because they can be built quickly. These fusion power plant designs will not cost very much. In essence, we could soon be using them to be cranking out a lot of electricity for not that much money. When the big energy companies start building these fusion power plants, I'd be very surprised if the actual construction time will take more than about a year. Again, I'm about to demonstrate a proof of physics experiment for you. It only costs about $40. It is critical for physics. It is critical for fusion. I need millions of people to see this experiment. If I can reach that goal, then that should help influence the politicians. I can't dance around this issue. I need money. I need funding. Funding is required in order to prove and test my fusion power plant designs. If I had the funding today, tomorrow, I would start construction for a fusion energy laboratory here in Minnesota. Personally, I would like staged funding. My plan has 3 phases. Each stage of funding would fund one of the phases of the plan. With staged funding, I must prove myself before each stage of funding. Think of this science film. Think of the experiment that I'm about to show you as proof for the first stage of funding. If the physics in this science film is impressive enough, and if overall this science film is impressive enough, then with your help, I hope this will be instrumental in getting the funding I need for phase 1. That is one reason I've put so much work into this film. I figure I need to impress you in order to get your help. To summarize, first, if this film is good enough, then with your help, I could get the funding for the first phase of my fusion energy lab. Second, if I can further prove my physics in phase 1, then I will get enough funding for phase 2. Third, if I can prove that engineering in phase 2, then I'll get the funding for phase 3. If this all works, then it will dramatically change our world. Again, what I'm about to demonstrate is the key detail that makes commercial fusion power plants viable right now